everyone, and welcome to A New Direction. My name is Jay Izzo, and he's back. Yes, sir. Yes, ma'am. Steve Weinberg is going to rejoin us for part 2 of Above Quota Performance, tips and techniques for sales pros and their mastery of sales professionals. Listen, I'm going to just tell you something. This show is going to be outstanding because we're going to get into some nitty gritty details in this show. Listen, if you're a sales manager or you're a salesperson, we're going to talk about follow-up. We're going to talk about pipelines. We're going to talk about LinkedIn. And those are 3 of the big ones that we're going to talk about. We may get to some other things along the way, but those are the 3 big ones we're going to talk about because Steve is going to explain to you probably the 3 most difficult areas for sales professionals to get a hold of is follow-up, is pipelines, and using LinkedIn in a way that's going to benefit them. And so we're going to hit those 3 things for sure. But before we get to him, let's do what we do every week, right? And listen, let's check in, right? We're 4-part people. We're physical, mental, emotional, spiritual people. We do a check-in every week if you're new joining us to the show. And thank you for joining us. If you're watching us on DBTV or you're listening to us by podcast or radio across this country, we appreciate you listening in. So what we do is we check in 4 areas of your life. Right. And we check in a scale of 1 to 10, 1 being this area of my life's not doing well, 10 being this area of my life is doing outstanding. Now, whatever the number is that you give yourself, 5 being average, whatever that number is, I don't want you to be alarmed going, oh my gosh, I'm really doing bad. No. I want you to think of that as a starting place for you to do better. Okay. So let's take the physical area. Scale of 1 to 10. All right. Your exercise habits, your eating habits, getting enough sleep, drinking enough water, those type of things, getting regular checkups, right, with your doctor. On a scale of 1 to 10, how would you say you're doing? All right. Listen, if you're a 2, you're not going to get to a 10 in a day. All right. But we can make progress just moving up like 2.5, maybe a 3, right? We could do some things we could change, right? And then we need to stay on that progression. So that's your first number, is the physical number. The second number is the mental or the intellectual number. And this is about learning and growth. All right, we've had Dr. Gottfredson has been on here talking about mindsets, right? And you have to have a growth mindset, meaning that you believe that you can change and that you can learn and that you can grow. And by the way, learning, it doesn't matter what your age is. You should always be learning, right? So if you were to evaluate yourself on learning something new, learning new skills, being better at the skills that you have, improving yourself on a scale of 1 to 10, how would you evaluate yourself? All right, that's your second number. The third number is the emotional number, right? And that number is basically breaks down to 2 things. One is how well are you able to control your emotions under stress, pressure, right? When you're hangry, we all get a little angry. Can you still control your emotions, right? And then the second piece is how well are you able to understand and tap into the emotions of another person. Steve is going to absolutely tell you, he would tell you, listen, you're going to have to be a great listener and you need to understand the emotions of the people that you're speaking to. Because if you can understand and listen to those, right, you're going to have a better chance at being a better sales professional. So on a scale of 1 to 10, how would you say you're doing emotionally? And then finally, the fourth area, and that's the spiritual area. And I know we get a lot of pushback on the spiritual part because a lot of people don't want to think that they're spiritual, but we're all spiritual people. We all live by faith. We all have hope, right? Right. That we've got plans for the future that we believe are going to happen and that we hope for them. And then what we do is we follow through, even though they haven't happened yet, as if they're going to happen. By the way, I know that this is not popular. All right. I'm going to say something that's not real popular, right? And I hear this all the time, that hope is not a strategy. But can I tell you something? Hope is part of every strategy, whether you like it or not. Because you could do all the processes that you want in the world. Nothing is guaranteed. But you have faith in the process, right? Because you can't do anything about the scoreboard. But you can do everything that you can to give yourself in the best position to do that. And that requires faith and hope. It just does. As a farm boy, I could tell you, so we planted, we cultivated, we did everything we could. And at the end of the day, guess what? We hoped that it'd come up because we did everything right. And that's just absolutely the truth. And that's true of every part of your life. Those 4 areas are like the 4 tires on your car, right? And those tires, if they're at the right level, the car runs great. But if one tire is a little low or too flat, the car doesn't run efficiently or effectively. And if all four are too low, then what happens is we can ruin the car, or at least parts of the car. So we want to bring our tires up to the correct level. And speaking of someone who does that, his name's Steve Weinberg. He has closed over $500 million in new business throughout his career. He has spent his life selling and helping others sell better and faster and sell more. He is an expert at building, guiding, and sustaining high caliber sales teams. Steve has led many sales kickoffs, introduced formal sales training at several companies, including vice presidencies at Dun & Bradstreet, AC Nielsen, Deloitte. That's just a few. Steve earned his bachelor's of economics and business administration from Northbrook University and his MBA from Loyola University. He's also a CPA and experienced accounting, consulting, and as a graduate level economics instructor as well. He's author of Above Quota Performance, and he rejoins us here again. Steve Weinberg, welcome back to A New Direction.
Thanks, Jay. It's great to be here.
All right, Steve. We were on last week. We got into some nitty-gritty things, but we're going to talk about some of the things that are not necessarily the most popular topics in the world. One of those is follow-up. And follow-up is one of the most difficult things, it seems, that professional salespeople struggle with. Especially I see this with new salespeople. What's going on there with follow-up that makes it such a struggle? And what can we do about it?
Follow-up has become more difficult, too. I mean, it was difficult before the pandemic, and it's probably 5 times more difficult now. Before the pandemic, we could pick up the phone and call somebody, although lately everybody relies on email and text and sometimes visit with people. And then after the pandemic, our access has really been limited. Forget going to visit them. That isn't happening. Getting them on the phone is, people don't even like to talk on the phone anymore. A text is very brief and you don't really get much information from it. And a lot of times it's difficult to get somebody to commit to a Zoom call because they're over Zoomed. They're, they go in the morning and by noon, they've already been on 3 or 4 Zooms, and then they've got maybe 1 or 2 more in the afternoon, and they just don't want another one. So it's really difficult to reach people. So that makes follow-up even harder. But when you think about it, let's say you have a good first or second meeting with somebody, and you want to get to the finish line, to the close. How do you get from the beginning to the end? Well, there's got to be a lot of follow-up involved. The follow-up it really means that you're in contact with them, you're answering the buyer's questions, you're responding to any inquiries they have, any concerns. We talked last week about objections. You need to understand where they're coming from on objections. You need to build, in most cases, a business case for them to move forward. Well, that needs to be done collaboratively. If you build a business case and they don't buy into it, then you've wasted a lot of time. So follow-up is key. And I've seen a lot of salespeople make very easy mistakes in follow-up. The first one is they only go back to their contact, the person who may have initiated a conversation with them or who is willing to speak with them. But that person may be only 1/20th of the buying team or less or more. So there are a lot of people involved in it, and you need to follow up with every single one of them. And I can tell you from doing account reviews with salespeople that when I sat down with them, I would say, how's the sale going? And they would tell me, oh, it's wonderful. It's great. Everything's going well. Well, how do you know that? Well, they returned my phone call and they were real nice to me. And in fact, they didn't have any objections. And so I would say, all right, what's the next step? What are you doing? What have you committed to do and what have they committed to do? Because they need to commit to actions as well. It's not, selling is not just a one-sided activity on the part of the salesperson. The salesperson needs to be involved, but also the buyer needs to be engaged. And if the buyer is not doing things and responding back to you, then your chances of getting the sale are diminished. But it's also important, and I say in the book, that if you're not winning, you're losing. Well, if you're not winning, what that means is you're not getting buying signals and you're not getting progress made from call to call to call, whether it's on the phone, whether it's on Zoom, email, or so forth. Every time that you have a contact with your person in the buyer's company, you should be moving the sale forward a step, whether it's a small step or a large step or whatever has been committed to. And if you're not doing that and you're just stalling on that, it's a bad sign. So it's important to follow up with people. Some people don't like, some of the buyers don't like to be rushed. So what I would always do is ask them, when do you want me to contact you next? And it's unacceptable if they say, we'll get back to you if we're interested. Well, that's you might as well go on to the next one. But if they do that, you need to probe and find out what are they really thinking? Are they really serious about you or not? And if they are, you need to set a date and also set an activity. What are you going to do by that date, and what are they going to do by that date?
Let me ask you this question, and I can't remember if you addressed this specifically or not. When you are training salespeople,
right,
and they're struggling with follow-up, how do we get them motivated, or can we get them motivated to do better follow-up?
I like using role plays when I'm training salespeople, and then I play the part of the I'll call it the hard ass buyer, and be difficult to reach and difficult to speak with, so that they have an understanding of what they're up against. And then afterwards, when we finish the role play, I'll debrief it with them and explain what they did right, what they did wrong, and how to improve it. But the key thing with follow-up is to make sure that I use the analogy of American football. The idea when you play football, when you go and do an offensive play, the idea is not to score a touchdown. That's not, that's wonderful, but it's not. What you're planning to do is get your next first down. So you want to keep going. You want to get a first down, a first down, a first down, and keep going down the field. That's what you're trying to do. Well, sales is the same thing. You want to keep moving forward. You're not going to go from an initial presentation to a touchdown or a close of sale. That's very unrealistic. So the way to do that is to keep making progress, just like first downs.
So matriculate down the field. That's it. I've heard it said over and over again. This leads us to the issue of prospecting. And because prospecting is I think most salespeople, especially when they get started, they have a difficulty with prospecting. And you have a quote here from Zig Ziglar. He calls it the sin of the desert, what he calls it. And if you are unwilling to prospect, and you say that you need to be prospecting every day. So you've got a couple things here. One is let's prospecting, and then let's talk about the sales funnel, because you have the mathematics of the sales funnel, which is very difficult for people to understand. So let's try to put those two together, if you don't mind, and help people work through the prospecting issues and understanding the mathematics of the sales funnel.
Well, a lot of people don't like prospecting because they don't feel that it's productive, or also that they don't like rejection. But simply put, if you're not out prospecting, if you don't do a certain amount of prospecting, I think in most cases you'll fail in sales. And I've never met to this day someone who says, I love prospecting. Just give me 5,000 leads and let me start calling these people, okay? Or names. Give me the phone book or give me a list, and I'd love to just call these people. Nobody likes doing that, right? So, but we need to understand that if we want to make sales and if we want to start building a pipeline, it really starts by prospecting in what I call in the right area, which I call the sweet spot. and going after target customers or buyers where your particular value proposition, their needs, and your competitive strengths intersect. If you can find prospects in that area, which I call the sweet spot, those are your best prospects. Now, some people will use what they call an ideal customer profile, and that's very close to that, but it doesn't take into consideration the two things. One is that they, in fact, may not be someone that has a need or understands your value proposition. And secondly, they may not be ready to buy right now. So it's important for salespeople to have the discipline to prospect. And what I always suggested to my sales teams was that I think it's hard to say to them, okay, let's take every Wednesday and you prospect all day on Wednesday. That's a pretty tough assignment. I think it's better to break it up into chunks. So let's just take an hour out of every day. And during that hour, let's take that list that I talked about and let's start calling people on the list or emailing them or some kind of a marketing program to go after them, with the understanding that it's going to take a lot of contacts before you really get a good qualified prospect. It's not, you're not going to contact 10 people and get 5 qualified prospects. That's highly unlikely unless you're in an unusual situation, unless you're selling water in the desert, maybe. But it's just not going to happen. So you have to understand that people are going to say to you, no, I don't want to talk to you, or no, I'm not interested, or they'll hang up on you. And salespeople have to learn that they can't take that personally. They're not hanging up on you. They're not hanging up on Steve Weinberg. They're hanging up because they're either not interested or you caught them at a bad time, or perhaps your little pitch to them didn't resonate with them. So then, you go on, maybe you need to fix the pitch and go on to the next one and keep refining it until you find one that works. And when that works, keep refining another one. And that's what I would like. That when I work with salespeople, that's what I really like to do, is find out something that worked for them, and let's say try it on 5 prospects and try something different on another 5 prospects and something different on another one, and see which one works the best, and then keep refining that. And then from all these calls, we'll have a set of people that we call suspects. And the suspects are people that we will call on and find out if they intend to buy or are interested in what we have, or a number of other actions on their part to become a qualified prospect, where they really then start entering into the funnel. So a lot of people fail on this. And what I've seen happen is that salespeople will get, let's say, 10 active prospects, and they'll work only those 10 active prospects for months and not call anybody else or not add anything to the pipeline. And let's say maybe they're really good and they end up closing 2 or 3 of those, of the 10, which is highly unusual. But once that's done, then who are they going to sell? They have nobody else. And so then they may go months before they have another sale, because they haven't replenished their funnel. They haven't continually added new prospects into the top of the funnel. The idea behind it is kind of like a waterfall that you just keep wanting to add to the top, and then they'll kind of just settle down through the funnel. And each time, at every stage of the funnel, there'll be less and less and less. So you start out with, let's say, 5,000 suspects that become maybe 2,000 prospects, that become maybe 1,000 leads, of which you may make 200 calls on our presentations. And from those 200, you might have maybe 50 follow-up meetings, of which you make 40 proposals, and then you get down and you close 10 of those. So that's, from 5,000, you've got 10. And I mean, that's a very realistic funnel. And the other kind of funnel looks like a flute. It doesn't work, because you just don't go 10, 10, 10, 10, and close 10. It's very unrealistic and
So,
inefficient.
so let me. I want to just jump back to the prospecting thing a little bit.
Sure.
How many calls, based on your experience and research, how many calls do you need to make to prospects? I mean, is it one call, 10 calls, 20 calls? How many calls will you have to make? Should you, or what's the averages? What's the law of statistics say?
Well, I've seen a lot of different numbers. I've seen in a lot of people, I've seen goals of 100 a day. And I think that's, if you're spending the whole day doing it, that's too low. But if you're doing what I suggest, which is, just taking an hour out of every day, and, probably 90% of them aren't going to go through. So in that 1 hour, there's 60 minutes. You should be able to get 100 calls in. That's what I think. And of those 100 calls, maybe if you're really good, if it's a good day for you, maybe 5 to 8 will even speak with you. And if that happens, you've had a good day. So if I made, if I spent an hour making, 100 calls, and during that time, I have 5 to 8 to follow up with afterwards, I've had a good day. And it's been very productive. And I don't want to focus on the 90% of them that don't even want to talk to me. It's just like, water off my back if I'm a duck. It's just not important. Okay. Let's focus on the ones that do want to talk to you.
Right. Okay. His name is Steve Weinberg. The book is called Above Quota Performance. You're listening to him here on A New Direction. Hey, folks, Epic Physical Therapy, my physical therapist. I think they should be yours too, by the way. Listen, whether it's injury, surgery, suffering every day, aches and pains. Listen, they work professional athletes to people like you and me. When you're ready for your epic relief, your epic recovery, and your epic results, don't look any further. Go to epicpt.com. That's EPICPT.com. And Linda Craft Team Realtors for more than 38 years been helping people transition in life. Yes, let's think about it. Every time that you've moved to a new place, there's been a life transition. Whether it's you're moving out of an apartment to your first home, whether you're increasing the size of your home, downsizing, whatever it is, it's a life transition. Well, you know what? Linda Craft Team Realtors has been doing that successfully now for more than 38 years. They would love to help you, whether you're buying or selling your next home or your first home. Just go to lindacraft.com. That's LINDACRAFT.com. And we're back here on A New Direction with Steve Weinberg and his book, Above Quota Performance. So, Steve, let's dig into this mathematics. You said to me before the show that one of the most difficult things for people, sales professionals, to wrap their mind around is the mathematics of the sales funnel. Why is this such a difficult process for them to grab a hold of?
I think it's the expectation that salespeople have that when they contact somebody, if they have any amount of interest in them, if they get a small set of them to work, that they're going to sell the majority of them, and at the end of the day, they'll make their quota. And the reality is that's not true. So, and they have to continue, as I mentioned earlier, to keep adding more and more each time, and then work at each stage of the pipeline or the funnel, because you don't want salespeople that only work on the closing state. We'll close a few of those, but then they won't have anything to close for months. I mean, the ideal situation for a sales pro and for the sales manager is that the salesperson is closing every month consistently. They're closing sales. Well, how are you going to do that? The only way to do that is assuming that every sale has to go through several stages, is to work all the different stages each month with different prospects. And some people just don't understand that, but and I give them very vivid examples of that, using usually their own industry and then working the numbers. And people don't understand that there's only 5 ways to increase sales. And using the math of the funnel, there's really only 5 ways to increase sales, and one of them is by just putting in more inputs at the top. And I think that's the easiest way. The easiest way is to do that. Another way to increase sales is to increase your sales price. Well, that's often difficult to do. So you're not going to increase your revenue that way very easily. You can change the quality of your leads, and that's difficult to do because that requires putting in place a new marketing program that you need to get your marketing people or your pre-sales people and everybody involved in doing. You need to, or you could improve your win percent. That's probably the hardest thing to do. Where let's say if you're winning 3 out of 10, you want to try to win 4 out of 10. Well, how are you going to do that? What's going to make that happen? And the only other way to increase sales would be to hire more salespeople. And nobody wants to give up a piece of their territory so that the company could hire more salespeople. So if you want to increase your sales, you need to put in more inputs or more leads at the top. And that only comes from prospecting.
You have something in your book said you with an exclamation point, by the way. You say, "Don't be a quota sloth."
Right.
Tell people what a quota sloth is.
Well, you know what a sloth is, right? A sloth just hangs in the tree and just kind of does nothing all the time, right? And a quota sloth is somebody that thinks that they can hit quota by doing just a minimal amount of work and only focusing again on one activity, which would be to just close the sales that are in their pipeline rather than build a new pipeline. So it's really important. If you want to close a lot of business, the only way to do that are the 5 ways that I mentioned, or to increase the amount of prospecting or cold calling or whatever you want to call it. I prefer to call it business development. It doesn't scare people so much. When you say cold calling, people get nervous. They turn sweats and they run to the restroom to relieve themselves. So it's better just to call it business development, but it's the same thing.
We talked about this a little bit last week, but you have here to find the best path that you need to know. You talk about a few things here that I just think are just really important. One is your value proposition is part of that path, your competitive strength, and then which prospects are likely to have needs that you can fulfill. Can we just revisit that real quick? Because I think we talked about pretty much at length, about the value proposition.
Right.
But it's in the last show, but at the same time, I don't think people understand how important that having a great value proposition is, and understanding that well enough and their competitive strength can make such a huge impact on how a buyer responds.
Well, here's a really easy way to put it. If we did a role play and I just said to the salesperson, why should I buy your product? Give me the reasons. And I'll just sit there and listen. What are you going to say to them? Well, I think you should buy it because it's a really good product. Oh, really? We're the most technically advanced product. We have the best price. We have all these. Well, none of these things really matter. What matters is what is your product or service or solution going to do for the buyer once they buy it?
Right.
And that's the value proposition is, what does it bring to them? What's in it for them if they buy it? So if they say to you, why should I buy it? You've got to be able to articulate succinctly and shortly an answer in less than a minute of why they should buy it and what value it's going to bring to them. And that's your value proposition. And if you can't do that, then you're not going to make sales. You might think about going into another career.
And then there's the competitive advantage and competitive strength.
Right.
And I wonder often, correct me if I'm wrong, because you're the professional in this area, but I wonder if salespeople really fully understand their product or services competitive strengths and what differentiates them.
I think some do and some don't. I blame companies, product marketing people, and marketing people for this in some ways, because I know when I went through training at my last company, they gave me all the reasons why that somebody should buy. Well, they should buy from you because we have 100 lists. Okay. And I go, 100 lists. Okay. So that means if someone else has 120 lists that they should buy from them instead of me, or, you know, give me something better than that. Well, we have more support people. We do a great job in that area. Oh, really? So the other companies don't have support people? They don't do a good job? I'm reading here that this other company has 24/7 support. We don't have that. So, why should they buy from us? Well, I want to focus on that. And let's really understand what that is. And one of the best ways that I found was to contact customers and ask them what value they're getting out of the product, what the ones that are actually using it, and go visit them and take them out to dinner or lunch and interview them, because these people know. And I'll tell you something, they know a whole lot more than your product marketing people and marketing people, because they're using it every day. So there's your value proposition. What time does it save them? What cost does it save them? Does it increase their revenue? Does it make it more efficient for them?
Right.
Can they enter a new market because of it?
Right.
How does it make their day better than it did before they bought it?
Right.
These are important things to know. And if you don't know this as a salesperson, then I think you're operating blindfolded. So, you really need to know this and dig down and find it out. And sometimes your own people can't tell you that.
Right. And you make a point of saying that oftentimes it's personal, not necessarily professional. That can be a differentiator.
Yes.
Right.
Yeah. I mean, a lot of times, yeah, as I think we spoke about it on the last meeting, my goal was to make the person who bought my product or service a hero. Well, how do I do that? Well, I have to find out, in some cases, I have to find out what are they being measured on, and how can I help them achieve that goal. And if I can help them do that, these people will love you forever. And I've had the fortune of having people buy from me at 3 different companies. So when they moved from one company to another company, they contacted me and said, okay, we need you over here. Well, that's because I made sure that they did well personally when they purchased my product or service. That's really important. So it's not just, you want the company, the buyer's company, to do well, but you want the person who really pushed for you to do well as well.
Right. All right. So this is where we move into your secret sauce. I love that. You called it the secret sauce.
Right.
It's takeaway number 30. By the way, for people, when you're purchasing Quota Performance, you're going to find that Steve has these takeaways within the book that he gives you. They're just little 1-sentence takeaways. And this is from chapter 16, how to use LinkedIn for business development. And takeaway number 30 is LinkedIn.com is the secret sauce that will help you develop more leads. So, Steve, let's spend the time because I'm a big LinkedIn fan. You're a big LinkedIn fan, and we're both evangelists for it. I tell my clients, my coaching clients, you need to have an updated LinkedIn profile. Let's talk about LinkedIn, and let's talk about its effectiveness and why it's your secret sauce.
Well, in the book, I go through step by step what somebody needs to do in order to use LinkedIn for business development. Now, LinkedIn is very popular for people in the career search area. And I know some people that are also recruiters, and they told me they used LinkedIn exclusively. They've stopped using Monster.com and all the other prior applications, and they focus on LinkedIn. LinkedIn has, at last I saw, about 310 million active users in over 200 countries today, and 61 million senior level influencers that are on LinkedIn.
Yeah.
So there is no greater place in the world today to find business people and senior level business people than LinkedIn.com. There just isn't.
Yeah.
And I've been a user since 2004. So I've been a user now over 18 years, and I've been recognized by them as one of their early adopters. And early on, when I told people that I thought they should look at LinkedIn, they said, no, I don't want to do that. And I went, why? Well, they said, well, they're going to charge us for this. Well, it's been 18 years and I haven't paid a cent. So, maybe they will charge at some point in time, but they haven't yet. They do have premium level packages that you could buy. I think some of them are really wonderful. They do have a great one for sales, and I would recommend people look at it.
Yeah.
But LinkedIn, for those that don't understand how it works, is really a networking tool. And if they've ever heard of the parlor game called The 6 Degrees of Kevin Bacon,
Yes.
if they know that,
Yeah.
then it works on a similar principle. And what that does is it makes it easier for you, the user, to reach somebody that you want to target as a possible suspect. So here's an example that I use in the book. We had, let's say, Kate Winslet trying to remember the example here. I'll get it in a second. It's a good one. Okay, Kate Winslet is 3 degrees from Jack Nicholson. So Jack Nicholson was in A Few Good Men.
Right.
And let's say he wants to get a hold of Kate Winslet. Well, he was also in The Departed with Leonardo DiCaprio. So then he calls up Leonardo and says, Leonardo, I know you were in Titanic with Kate Winslet. I want to get in touch with her. Can you put me in touch with her? So that's what we call 3 degrees of separation. And LinkedIn works on that same principle. So if I build a network of people of my own and I want to reach someone, I look and see how far is that person from my network. They could be 2 degrees of separation. They could be 3 degrees, but it makes it easier for me to reach that person if I have someone in between us to connect us. Now, there are other ways to do that, which I'll get into some of, which are groups and also what's called InMails. But let's say the first thing you would want to do in using LinkedIn is build your profile. And it's important that you build a professional profile. This is not Facebook. It's not, you don't put in pictures of your last vacation or when you were downing margaritas in Mexico. You don't put that in there. You put a very professional photograph in there. You put in what your career accomplishments are, but not as extensive as you might do in a resume. And once you have to take a considerable amount of time to do that. Yeah, and LinkedIn does have a tool for that.
Let me just say something about the profile, because I look at a lot of profiles every week, a ton of profiles. I get a ton of people who want to connect with me, and I'm pretty open to connecting with anyone. But the profiles, when I look at the profiles, right, for the most part, I think people's profile picture is pretty good. But when I read the profile oftentimes either reads really, really salesy. Like if I accept you as, I could pretty much 95% of the time, I could pretty much tell if somebody's going to just open up with an InMail to me, that they're going to try to sell me something without getting to know me first. And that irritates me, by the way. I'm just going to be really, really honest with you. I hate the first conversation. And part of that is I know what they're going to do based on what their LinkedIn profile says. right? That, I am I help coaches, because I'm a coach, right? I help coaches increase to 6 figures a month, right? Well, I know what's going to happen if I accept that. The first direct message, the first private message I'm going to get from them is, are you getting, 6 figures a month from your coaching career? I'd like to show you what our program is, blah, 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 blah. And it's so irritating because, and I know better. And I think and I tweak my profile all the time. I try to tweak it all the time. I'm always looking for what works, what doesn't work, what gets me more responses, what doesn't get responses. I'm looking at that all the time. I don't think we can underestimate building your personal profile and the importance of getting not just your picture right, but also making sure that your headline is correct and that people are willing to want to do business with you. You agree with that?
Absolutely. And the whole idea of approaching people when building your contacts is also a strategy that people really don't understand. What some people do is, well, let's start out. A salesperson should have a target group of companies that they want to go after. So they start doing searches on the companies. And let's say one of the companies, I'll pick a name, is Walgreens. So I want to sell to Walgreens, not the local Walgreens, but the headquarters. So I put the name in Walgreens, and then I put in some titles. Once I get into Walgreens, I put in some titles that I want to see. And I may say, okay, I want to sell the sourcing department at Walgreens or the purchasing department. So I put in typical titles and I see names, and I'll write these names down on a piece of paper. So I'll say, okay, these are the names of the people that I want to contact. Well, how do I contact these people? What I see some people do is they'll put in the name Nancy Jones and they'll click on connect. Okay. And Nancy gets this message saying Steve Weinberg wants to connect to you. It doesn't say why. It doesn't say anything at all. What's in it for her if she accepts it? What is it about me that would make it interesting for her to accept? Well, that, as far as I'm concerned, is stupid and it's a waste of time.
Right.
So a key thing is to prepare a message to somebody as to why, if they connect with you on LinkedIn, it's to their benefit. What are you going to do for them?
Yeah.
And never, ever, ever a sales pitch. Okay. So what do I mean by that? Well, I don't say, Nancy, I've got this great product that's going to help you in your everyday life. Connect with me and I'll tell you all about it. Because they will go in 9 out of 10 times or more, they'll just delete that.
Yeah. Yeah.
Nobody wants that. That's spam. And I don't want it either. And I don't want to see messages like that. And I do get messages like that, in mail and regular ones, connection ones. So I would usually say to somebody, we have a common connection, or I'll request somebody that I know. If I have someone that knows Nancy, I'll ask them to introduce me to her. Now there's
Steve, I'm going to stop you right here because we're going to take a break right here real quick, and then we're going to come back and we're going to talk more about LinkedIn. You're listening to Steve Weinberg, author of Above Quota Performance. You're listening to him here on A New Direction. Hey, folks, Epic Physical Therapy, listen, they have the most top-of-the-line equipment, the Ultra G anti-gravity treadmill, normal tech, compression sleeves, game ready. That's just a few. And then, of course, they're certified in most comprehensive cutting-edge treatments like blood flow restriction therapy, dry needling, cupping. And that's just a few. Listen, when you're ready for your epic relief, epic recovery, epic results, go to epicpt.com. That's EPICPT.com. And Linda Craft Team Realtors. Listen, they are known as the legends of customer service, but what they're really known for is your life transition. Every place you've ever lived is a transition in life. They do it in a way to take the stress out of it in the most efficient way, to help you make that transition as smoothly as possible. So when you're ready to sell, buy your home, and make that next life transition, go to lindacraft.com. That's LINDACRAFT.com. And we're back here on A New Direction with Steve Weinberg. We're talking about his book, Above Quota Performance, and we're talking about LinkedIn as the secret sauce for you folks in sales. And so, Steve, I'm sorry I didn't mean to cut you off. We were up against a break there. So let's get back into. We just talked about how people make that sales pitch. It's irritating. Oftentimes, what happens is, if that's the first thing for me anyway, what I will do is I not only delete the message, I actually remove them from my list of people. They're no longer a contact because it's just not worth it for me.
Now, here's another hint. When you look at somebody's name and you look at their profile, look at how many contacts that they have. If they have 16 connections and you send them something, forget it. They don't spend any time on LinkedIn, and they're not going to spend any time with you.
Right.
If they have 250, maybe. If it says 500 plus, you've got a better chance of that person responding to you if you give them a personalized message. So key thing here is personalize your invitations. No just one click thing. Forget that.
Right.
The other thing is groups. Now, LinkedIn has, I don't know how many groups. I would say hundreds of thousands of groups.
Yeah.
Now, these groups are everything from people that love cats and dogs, to people that love baseball and football and soccer teams, to people that love astronomy, to people that love country dancing. I mean, there's a group of everything.
Yep.
I'm convinced of that. There's a group of people that like to play checkers. So there's a group for everything. So if somebody, when you build your profile, LinkedIn used to limit you to 50 groups, to joining 50 groups. I understand that limit has been dropped. So you should join as many groups as you could possibly join. Now, what's the downside to that? When you join groups, you could get lots of emails and lots of alerts, but you can also turn those off.
Right.
So you can manage that. I mean, if you, like, I'm in the SAP users group, there are hundreds of mail every day from these people, and I don't have the time to read them all. So I click that I get a digest. So once a day, I get a list of all the messages that came in on that. Right. But by joining the groups, it also makes it easier for you to find someone that you're targeting that may or may not be in your group, particularly like using my example of someone in purchasing or sourcing. If I'm in a purchasing or sourcing group, then I could go after, let's say, Nancy Jones and say, we're in the same purchasing and sourcing group. I would like to connect with you and discuss strategies about, where do we see the business going in 2023? What are some of the new developments? And by the way, that's what we discussed the first, second, third, fourth, fifth, and sixth time I contact them. Never an overt sales pitch. I'm always trying to build credibility and trust by providing them with information or asking them for information. Like, where do you see it's going? Or is this important to you? Do you think artificial intelligence will help you out in the future? Little things like that. Or what about IT security? Is that an area of importance to you? So you're building credibility through your messages. At some point, you could say, are you the person at Walgreens that's in charge of making a decision in this area? And then you can get an answer. Now the answer is either yes or no. So if you get a no, then you say, well, who is? And they come back and say, well, that's Ralph. And you say, well, can you introduce me to Ralph? Now, once she says, yes, I can introduce you to Ralph, that's what we call a warm introduction. And that's the best thing that you could have. So then you contact Ralph through Nancy and say, well, Nancy gave me your name. I understand you're the person that makes decisions in this area. Can we set up a conversation?
Right. Go
ahead.
I want to say this about the groups thing, because I know for me, you could, by the way, people can search groups by whatever you want to search by. So you could search groups by anything. But like, I know for me as a coach, right, I have joined several business groups. One that's local here. There's a local business group in the Research Triangle Park. There's actually a couple that I've joined. Have thousands of people in these groups. and some that I want to connect with, and that I would like to talk to and get their thoughts on things. I never go into this initially about, hey, I'm a coach. Do you need a coach? And that's not what I do. I want to ask them what's going on in their business. I want to ask them about what's happening in their life and business. What are their biggest challenges? What are the things that they see that they're struggling in their industry? Those type of things, and maybe I can be helpful. But I think the thing that people have to understand is that they can be selective about these groups. And by the way, they tell you how many people is in the group. And one of the things, Steve, and I don't know if you agree with me on this, that there are some groups that have a few people in it, right? Like when I say a few, I mean like a few hundred that are actually incredibly active. And then I've seen groups that have tens of thousands of people in it, and they're not all that active.
Right.
But you could still be connected with those people.
Right.
And I think people underestimate how powerful those groups are to be able to find the people that you're actually looking for. Or maybe you want to do some further intel. Maybe you want to get more information. I think that's the other thing that we miss about LinkedIn is that, okay, so now you're connected with the person who makes the decision. Well, what can you learn about them? And of course, if they've got a completed profile, you have so much information about where they went to school, what jobs they've had in the past, pretty much where they lived, what are they interested in, what charities do they belong to. You have so many conversation pieces that you could start that have nothing to do with sales that can actually make that a much easier transition, right?
Exactly. And I think let's say, if I know I'm going to speak with Jay Izzo, if I don't look at his LinkedIn profile, I think that's sales malpractice. Now, there's one other area that I would like to highlight is that you can follow a company. So let's say
Yes.
the company I want to follow is 3M. And this is what I use to close the largest sale in our company's history. I follow this company, and they issued a press release saying that they'd hired somebody to be in charge of their anti-money laundering area. Okay, well, I was selling anti-money laundering solutions, and they were a target company, and this person was just hired. So I waited a little while, and then I approached that person, and I had that name from the press release, and I looked them up in LinkedIn. So I approached that person after going through what I explained, and I said, well, I've been in the area of anti-money laundering. I've been working with your company. And after an initial couple of weeks of going back and forth, I asked that person if they were in the market for an anti-money laundering solution, as their prior person was. The prior person before him had left. And he said, yeah, I just hired someone that I put in charge of that. And I said, oh, really? Who is that person? And can you introduce me? And he did. And then I went and met with that person. And about 9 months later, I closed the largest sale in the company's history. And this was all from following the news on that company.
Right.
And using LinkedIn as an information tool. Right. So from my mind, salespeople that are unwilling to use LinkedIn, the first group that they should join is the Flat Earth Society, because these people are just not in reality. If they want to succeed in business, and this is a tool that's available to them, why would you not use this tool? And I'm not being paid by LinkedIn,
right?
And I don't endorse them. I mean, there's no relationship between us. But to me, it should be a tool in your quiver. It should be something you use in addition to everything else. It's an information source, just like Googling somebody's name as well. But look at LinkedIn and start building build your profile, and then start inviting people, because the goal is that you want to end up with as many connections as possible of people and then people that you target, and then just keep building it and building and building it. And LinkedIn can actually use the contacts that you have in Outlook and pull those in, and then you can build the message from that as well. So, I mean, there are lots of different ways to build your connection list.
Yeah.
But right now I have about 3,000 connections.
Yeah.
So and every day I think I add a few more every single day.
Yeah.
And I just can't understand why salespeople would not want to use this tool.
You know, you and I connected through LinkedIn, and which is how really you got to the show. I think was really ultimately through LinkedIn. We've done an hour. I can't believe how fast it goes.
Right.
You've been awesome.
Thanks, Jay.
I could put you on for another hour, and we could still be talking about it. Tell people how they can get a hold of you, Steve.
People can reach me at my website, which is www.steveweinbergsales. That's one word, STEVEWEINBERGSALES.com. They can reach me there. I do receive messages every day, and I respond to them from all over the world. And if somebody likes what they've heard, I encourage them to go to Amazon.com or BarnesandNoble.com or BooksAMillion.com or even Walmart.com and pick a copy of this wonderful book, which they'll find to be very useful for them in the sales career.
His name is Steve Weinberg. You can find him on LinkedIn too, by the way. Yeah,
I want you to send me a connection message. You've got to give me a good reason why.
Yeah, I will put Steve's LinkedIn link. I will put his website, and I will put a link to the book on the blog post that's associated with this show, so that you can reach him in a variety of different ways. Folks, that's the show. You know what I say to you every week: you're in control of three things: your attitude, your effort, and your resiliency. I know that your circumstances can be tough and difficult at times, but you're still in control of those three things at all times. Take control of your attitude, take control of your effort, your excellence, and take control of your resiliencies. Only you can get back up again. Get back up, because you've got this. I'll be back next week with another great guest. It's going to be another great book. It's going to be another great show. As I say to you everywhere, all over the world, thank you so much, and ciao, everybody.